What will happen to them if something happens to you? Well, it is dark. You can't see anything. The sun is starting to come up. And yes, you can see the outline of the meeting house at the head of the green. The meeting house was a 2.5-story building which functioned as a meeting house, community center, and as a church. We have a large supply of gunpowder on the second floor of that meeting house, and Joshua Simons, a member of the Lexington militia, he sprawled out on the floor with his cocked pistol pointing into an opening of a barrel of gunpowder, and he is prepared to detonate it if the soldiers come into the building. Now the sun is up. Everything is bright, but you still can't see beyond the meeting house. It's blocking the view. Suddenly, you hear the faint sounds of fife and drum. It's getting louder and louder and louder. Look! What is it emerging on either side of the meeting house? Oh my gosh! A sea of scarlet! Soldiers on horseback, men on foot. Your head is pounding. Your heart is beating fast. The tension, the fear, the anxiety is almost unbearable. These men are professional soldiers from the most powerful military force in the world at that time, the British Army. And what are you? Farmers, tradesmen, cobblers, cabinet makers. And you're not particularly well equipped. Wow. They're now coming closer and closer and closer. The sun is bouncing off their red tunics. Muskets lowered. Bayonets flashing in the morning sun. They're getting closer and closer. How can you stand it? Look! Coming towards you. Major John Pitcairn on his horse. He rides up and he stops right in front of you. Raises his saber above his head. He's now riding up and down in front of you. And he's brandishing his saber. And he's giving the command. Disperse, you rebels! Damn you scoundrels! Lay down your arms and disperse! Well, Captain Parker, of course, he is now standing in front of you. You've all assembled on the green. He gives the command. Stand your ground! Do not fire unless fired upon. But if it means to have war, let it begin here. At that point, a shot rings out. Who fired first? It's been more than 230 years, and amidst all the theories and hypotheses and speculations, nobody knows who actually fired first. Suffice it to say, the light infantry opens fire upon you. And they killed 8 of you, and they wound 10 of you. Those of you who were not felled by a musket ball after the soldiers discharged their muskets, they lunged forward, bayonets flashing in the morning sun. One of you, Jonathan Harrington Jr., shot in the back while he was turning around because when Parker gave the command, stand your ground, and he realized he was outnumbered, he gave you an order to leave the green, and Jonathan Harrington Jr., as he was turning around, he shot in the back. He crawls along the grass up to the front door of his house. There he dies in the arms of his wife Ruth. 7 Lexington militiamen fell on the green that morning. Their names: Samuel Hadley, John Brown, Caleb Harrington, Jonathan Harrington Jr., we just mentioned him, Robert Monroe, Isaac Muzzy, and Jonas Parker. The 8th man that fell, his name was Asahel Porter. Now, he was a roving farmer. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had gotten up very early. He was on his way to Boston to sell his eggs. taken prisoner by the soldier. He was brought to the green, and in all the confusion, he tried to make his escape, and they shot him down. Now he's buried in Woburn. The 7 Lexingtonians were buried in a hastily dug mass grave in ye old burying ground. Can you imagine how much confusion there had to be on the green that morning? Men running in different directions, yelling at the top of their lungs, the stench of gunpowder in everyone's nose. The officers had all they could do to control their men. But ultimately, they prevailed. And they got the men lined up. And they reformed the line of march. And they allowed the men to fire a traditional victory volley and to give the traditional victory cheer. Huzzah! 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 And off they march, out to Concord to fulfill their mission. Jonas Clark, Reverend Jonas Clark, Lexington's 3rd minister, he walked amongst the dead and wounded that day, and he proclaimed them as truly being the first victims of the sword of British tyranny. His words, and the names of those who fell on the green, are now inscribed on the War Memorial Monument that was put on the green and dedicated on July 4th, 1799. On April 20th, in 1835, the remains of the 7 Lexingtonians were exhumed from the grave and reburied in front of that monument. In 1775, Lexington was a small rural community. Only 750 people lived here. They were all related, either by birth or by marriage. So it's conceivable that everyone here felt the loss of lives on that most memorable moment. In taking a stand and confronting these 700 soldiers, these fallen militiamen and those who survived the battle came to be known as a symbol of the colonists' determination to throw off the yoke of oppression, and in the words of Sam Adams, to be free from any supreme authority on earth, and not to be under the will and legislative authority of man, but to have the law of nature as their rule. What happened on Lexington Green, April 19, 1775. That event really mobilized the colonists. I like to think that on that very day, 13 clocks chimed as one, unifying those colonists into a cause for which men were willing to sacrifice treasure, yea, and life itself, for their freedom, for their liberty, and for their independence. Now, what happened on the green was the opening salvo in a long and protracted war that ended with the signing of a peace treaty in Paris in September of 1783. But it had its beginning, folks. Where you are right now, Lexington, Massachusetts, birthplace of American liberty, freedom, and independence. I wish to thank you all for having me here today. I bid you well. Now I'll go home to my wife, Mrs. Revere, and I'll stay for a few moments if anyone has any questions.